Yorùbá TV 247.
Ẹ bá wa dá sí.
Ìpolówó ọjà tó kájí wọlé.
Ẹ bá wa dá sí.
Ọ̀rọ̀ lórí orílẹ̀-èdè Yorùbá gbogbogbò.
Ẹ bá wa dá sí.
Ẹ̀yin ará mi, ẹ súnmọ́ bí ẹ jẹ́ ká jọ pín.
Ẹ bá wa dá sí.
Yorùbá TV 247. Ẹ bá wa pín.
Gadugu was still that night, unnervingly still. A heavy silence clung to the city, broken only by the distant hum of military trucks rolling through empty streets. Inside the presidential compound, the final lights were being switched off. President Ibrahim Traore, known for his discipline and late-night briefings, had just wrapped up a high-level security meeting. He was walking alone through the marble corridor that led to his private quarters, flanked by the one man no one ever questioned, his most trusted guard. This man had been at his side since the beginning, battle-hardened, silent, deadly when needed. He had saved Traore's life more than once. They said the president only slept peacefully, knowing that he was on duty. But what no one knew, what no one could know, was that something had already shifted in the darkness. Somewhere, a line had been crossed. A signal had been sent. And now, one of the most protected men in Africa was about to face death not from a foreign assassin, but from the very man who swore to protect him with his life. At precisely 11:47 p.m. it happened. 3 gunshots, sharp, fast, deliberate, echoing through the marble halls like thunder. Guards scrambled, alarms blared, blood pooled on the polished floor tiles. Traore was down. His red beret had fallen beside him, his uniform soaked in crimson. The trusted guard stood over him, weapons still warm, eyes empty, as if possessed. Chaos erupted inside the palace. Radios screamed. Soldiers drew weapons. No one could believe what had just happened. Not here, not him, not Traore. And yet, as he lay motionless, something strange happened. He was still breathing. His name wasn't widely known to the public. No flashy press appearances, no social media. He existed in the shadows, exactly where a man like him was most dangerous. To the president, he was more than security. He was a shield, a ghost, a silent wall of steel in a world of shifting enemies. They had shared war zones, meals, and moments of silence during ambushes. Some whispered that Traore trusted him more than his own ministers. And why wouldn't he? The man had taken bullets for him, until now. He was called Commandant KS, initials only. His record was clean, decorated, loyal, or so it seemed. In private, Traore called him frère, brother. So how does a brother raise a gun to the man he swore to die for? The answer, it turns out, wasn't simple. In the days before the shooting, Commandant KS had started acting different, quieter than usual, distracted. He spent more time alone, avoided the usual evening debriefings, and stared into the distance when others laughed. Some noticed, but no one dared to ask. After all, this was Traore's most trusted man. If anyone was above suspicion, it was him. But something had been happening in secret. Encrypted messages, hidden calls, a meeting outside the city. Surveillance cameras later revealed a shadowy figure passing him a sealed envelope. Inside, unknown. What's clear now is that whatever was in that envelope changed everything. That night, as he walked behind Traore, hand hovering near his holster, he wasn't protecting, he was preparing. And in that moment of betrayal, when the trigger was pulled, it wasn't just bullets that hit Traore. It was the shattering of trust, the collapse of certainty, the rise of a darker, colder game being played from far beyond Burkina Faso's borders, and the man they thought would never break had just pulled the trigger heard around the world. The gunshots echoed like thunder through the presidential compound. 1, 2, 3, each one ripping through the air and through the heart of a nation. In the seconds that followed, time seemed to freeze. The marble corridor, once calm and polished, was now painted with splashes of blood, and lying in the center of it all was Captain Ibrahim Traore, the leader of a revolution, the symbol of a sovereign Africa, motionless, bleeding, barely breathing. Chaos exploded like a storm. Guards came running from every direction. Radios crackled with panic. Security protocols kicked in. The palace, usually a fortress of control, became a war zone of confusion. Some dropped to the floor thinking it was a foreign attack. Others yelled for medics. Orders clashed. But above the noise, one thing became terrifyingly clear. The shooter was not an outsider. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He stood there, the president's own elite protector, with the smoking gun still in his hand. His expression was empty. No rage, no regret, just a chilling calm, as if he had already accepted what was coming next. The guards hesitated. They didn't want to believe it. For a moment, no one moved. Was this real? Was this a drill? Had Commandant KS been drugged, controlled? But the blood on Traore's uniform said otherwise. Then came the takedown. One soldier shouted and lunged. Others followed. KS didn't resist. He dropped the gun, dropped to his knees. He whispered something, barely audible, before they slammed him to the floor. I had no choice. What did that mean? No choice. Forced, blackmailed, programmed. The questions exploded like wildfire, but the priority was clear. Save Traore. In the middle of the chaos, a medic slid to his knees, checked for a pulse, found one, weak. But there, against all odds, the man who took 3 bullets to the chest was still alive. But now, nothing was safe, because if the president's most loyal man could betray him, who else had turned? The sirens were deafening. Red lights flashed through the stone corridors of the presidential palace as emergency protocols slammed into place. Within minutes, the compound, normally a controlled hub of order and precision, dissolved into a hive of fear, confusion, and instinct. Elite guards sealed off every entrance. Automatic gates dropped with a metallic groan. Helicopters circled overhead. Inside the command center, screens lit up with urgent alerts. Attack inside the palace. Possible internal sabotage. Status of the president, unknown. Nobody knew what had just happened, only that Traore had been shot. And the shooter was one of their own. Commanders shouted conflicting orders. One squad was told to search for infiltrators. Another was ordered to evacuate the diplomatic wing. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some whispered that Traore was already dead. Others insisted it was an attempted coup. Foreign embassies were calling. The international press was circling. The military high command had gone silent. The entire capital held its breath. But at the center of the storm, deep inside a high-security medical bay under the palace, a team of military doctors worked desperately. Traore was wheeled in on a stretcher, barely conscious, chest soaked in blood, his breathing shallow and erratic. They didn't need to ask what happened. His wounds spoke louder than words. 3 bullets. 2 had torn through soft tissue. 1 had cracked a rib and grazed a lung. Every second counted. Above the chaos, one voice rang out, a young medical officer leaning over the table. He's still alive. We can save him. That sentence sparked something. Outside the operating room, his inner circle gathered. Their expressions weren't just grim. They were betrayed, shocked. But beneath the fear was a growing fire. Resolve. Because if Traore lived, there would be consequences. And if he died, Burkina Faso would burn. Time moved differently in the emergency bay. Every tick of the clock echoed like a drumbeat of fate. As President Ibrahim Traore lay pale and bleeding on the steel operating table, a quiet war broke out between death and determination. Monitors beeped erratically. The medical team, hand-picked for their precision and loyalty, worked with terrifying focus. There was no room for fear here, only action. 3 bullets. 1 had shattered a rib. Another had pierced clean through muscle. But the third had nearly killed him. It had torn into the edge of his lung. Blood was flooding into places it wasn't supposed to be. Oxygen levels were crashing. For most men, this would have been the end. But Traore wasn't like most men. He clung to life with something deeper than instinct, something almost defiant. His fingers twitched, his jaw clenched. Despite the anesthesia, the tension in his body was unmistakable, as if some part of him knew the battle wasn't over. Not out there, not in here. Outside the operating room, the palace remained in lockdown. Security chiefs stood in silent panic. A single sentence repeated in whispers through the halls. Is he still alive? No one had answers. Then, after hours of surgical combat, the lead doctor emerged. His face was streaked with sweat, blood on his scrubs, eyes wide. He made it. A breath of relief swept through the compound, fists unclenched. Some wept quietly, others simply stared in disbelief. Traore had done the impossible. He had survived a triple-shot execution attempt from point-blank range. But this wasn't just a story of survival. It was the opening act of something far bigger. Because when Traore opened his eyes again, groggy, weak, stitched and bruised, he didn't ask what happened. He whispered one word: justice. And with that, the man they tried to silence declared war. The room was quiet when he woke up. No machines beeping, no crowd of doctors, just a soft light, a heartbeat monitor, and the heavy silence of disbelief. Captain Ibrahim Traore opened his eyes slowly, blinking past the haze of painkillers and blood loss. His chest burned with every breath. His body felt like it had been through a war, and in many ways it had. The nurse at his side gasped. A second later, a military physician pressed an intercom. "He's awake." In seconds, the corridor outside came alive. Advisors, security chiefs, ministers, all frozen in anticipation. The man they thought they'd lost was breathing, conscious, alive, but no one knew what to expect. Would he remember? Would he speak? Inside the room, a general stepped forward, hand trembling slightly as he leaned over Traore. "Mon président, do you know where you are?" Traore didn't nod. He didn't cry. His eyes scanned the ceiling for a moment. Then, slowly, painfully, he turned his head and whispered just one word: justice. Not vengeance, not anger, not fear. Justice. That single word hit harder than any gunshot. It wasn't just a reaction, it was a decision, a direction, and for those who heard it, it sent a wave of electricity through the heart of the state. Because justice meant more than punishment. It meant investigation, retaliation, revelation. Traore wasn't just alive, he was ready to strike back. Immediately, the highest levels of Burkina Faso's security apparatus activated a classified protocol, codenamed Operation S24. It was a blueprint designed for one unthinkable scenario: the betrayal of the inner circle. Files were unlocked, phones traced, surveillance footage dissected. In less than 12 hours, the palace became a command center, not of defense, but of counterattack. And through it all, from his hospital bed, Traore remained silent. Watching, waiting, healing, but everyone knew he wouldn't stay silent for long. The initial reports called it a betrayal, a rogue act, a tragic anomaly, but Captain Traore wasn't convinced. From his hospital bed, bruised and stitched, he reviewed footage frame by frame. He listened to intercepted audio files. He read classified security briefs with the calm of a soldier preparing for his next battle. And then he saw it, a detail most missed. In the hours before the attack, Commandant KS had stepped out of the palace for exactly 12 minutes. No official record, no radio contact, just a silent gap in his usual pattern. That was the first red flag. The second came when analysts dug into his encrypted messaging app, deleted logs, VPN reroutes, 3 foreign numbers, unregistered, untraceable. The third was the payment, a sudden deposit into a distant cousin's overseas account, over $350,000 transferred in crypto. This wasn't betrayal born of emotion. This was a contract. Traore called in his intelligence chief. "Find the source," he said, voice raspy from surgery, but eyes sharp as ever. "And do it quietly." What followed was the most discreet and aggressive intelligence sweep in Burkina Faso's history. Surveillance drones were launched over diplomatic residences. Cyber units traced IPs through 3 continents. Agents were flown to Ghana, Mali, and Côte d'Ivoire under fake identities. Then came the discovery that changed everything. A secure satellite phone was found in the home of KS's cousin. Inside it, a message scheduled to auto-delete in 72 hours. The message was simple: target confirmed, proceed, funds secured. Priority: eliminate. It wasn't signed, but the number was linked indirectly to a known intelligence asset operating out of Abidjan. Now it was undeniable. This wasn't an internal act of madness. It was an operation. Somewhere beyond the borders of Burkina Faso, someone had given the order to kill Captain Ibrahim Traore, and he was going to find out who. Traore didn't make a public statement. No press conference, no televised address. Instead, The president, still recovering from 3 bullets to the chest, sat upright in a private military room, eyes locked on a digital map of West Africa. Red dots marked phone pings, encrypted transfers, and quiet alliances. To the outside world, he was resting, but behind those guarded walls, he was plotting the counterstrike. Only 6 people were in that room: his most trusted intelligence chief, his defense minister, 2 cyber ops specialists, a former mercenary turned double agent, and Traore. His words were cold, calm, calculated. No noise, no press, no panic. We take them before they take the country. And so began Operation Vortex, an off-the-books retaliation plan designed to dismantle the network behind his attempted assassination, piece by piece. In the dead of night, elite commandos slipped across the border into northern Côte d'Ivoire under civilian cover. At the same time, drones equipped with signal interceptors circled key targets across Ghana and Togo. Unmarked trucks rolled out from a military depot in eastern Burkina, loaded with surveillance gear and mobile black sites. Inside Ouagadougou, civilians saw nothing but calm, but underground, files were being decrypted, names sorted, collaborators flagged. One name kept appearing: a politician. He had fled Burkina months ago, claimed exile, but intel now placed him in a private estate just outside Abidjan, guarded by a small militia and receiving frequent calls from a European number tied to an embassy. Traore narrowed his eyes. He didn't want a message sent. He wanted a lesson delivered. Within 48 hours, the estate went dark. Communications cut. Guards vanished. No explosions, no blood on the street, just silence. A silence that spoke louder than any official warning. This wasn't justice through courts. This was justice through precision, and the world hadn't even realized the war had started. It was just after 2 a.m. when the operation hit. No sirens, no warning, just a quiet breach and the hum of a blacked-out convoy rolling through the eastern edge of Abidjan. Inside the walled compound of a luxury estate, guards were still on night rotation, relaxed, unprepared, confident in the silence of diplomatic protection. But that night, silence was the weapon. A tactical team, elite Burkina special forces in unmarked gear, moved in with surgical precision. In under 5 minutes, the perimeter was neutralized, communications cut, cameras disabled, no shots fired. Inside, they found him, Issaka Diallo, a former Burkina minister turned exile, long suspected of collaborating with foreign powers. But this time, the evidence was overwhelming. In his private study, agents discovered 2 encrypted satellite phones, a forged diplomatic badge from an unnamed European state, and a laptop connected to the same crypto wallet used to pay the assassin. But the real shock came with the second arrest. A man with dual passports, one Ivorian, one French, diplomatic clearance, a senior liaison officer assigned to regional stability programs. He had been meeting Diallo for weeks. They claimed it was for NGO coordination, but messages retrieved from his burner phone told a different story. Phase 1 failed, targets survived. What's the next step? The quote was released to Traore's inner circle only, but it was enough. Within hours, whispers spread from Niamey to Bamako, from Lomé to Paris. Leaders made discreet calls. Foreign embassies went silent. The Alliance of Sahel States, AES, was fully activated. This wasn't just a failed assassination, it was a geopolitical provocation. And someone had just gotten caught with their hands inside a sovereign nation's chest. And now, everyone was wondering, if Traore survived a hit that deep, what would he do next? The cameras rolled at exactly 8 p.m. For 2 weeks, the world had waited. Rumors had swirled that Traore was dead, in hiding, paralyzed, or plotting revenge. The silence from Ouagadougou had been deafening, but on this night, everything changed. The screen faded from black. There he was, standing, alive. Captain Ibrahim Traore, bandages still visible under his military uniform, scars fresh across his face, but his posture unshaken. He looked directly into the lens. No teleprompter, no scripted pause. Just a man who had survived 3 bullets and come back with fire in his eyes. His first words silenced a continent. They tried to end me. They failed. The room behind him was filled with flags, Burkina Faso's, the AES banner, and a new symbol, a rising falcon clutched in steel claws, the insignia of Operation Vortex. Every detail was deliberate, every word calculated for impact. He didn't name names, not directly, but the message was clear. We have identified those responsible. Some wore uniforms, others wore suits, some hid behind embassies, others behind fake causes, but they will all face justice in this life or the next. The speech wasn't just for Burkina Faso, it was for every leader watching from a distance, wondering if Traore would back down. He didn't. To those who planned this attack, understand this, I am still here, and now I'm not just fighting for my life, I'm fighting for the future of this continent. You came for a man, you woke a movement. The crowd outside the palace erupted into chants. Traore! 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 In that moment, history split. He wasn't just a survivor, he was a symbol of defiance, of sovereignty, of the unbreakable will of a people rising from the ashes. And somewhere, in the silence of a foreign office, someone realized they hadn't stopped Traore, they had made him unstoppable.
Life moves fast. Your bank should
Yorùbá TV 247.
Ẹ bá wa dá sí.
Ìpolówó ọjà tó kájí wọlé.
Ẹ bá wa dá sí.
Ọ̀rọ̀ lórí orílẹ̀-èdè Yorùbá gbogbogbò.
Ẹ bá wa dá sí.
Ẹ̀yin ará mi, ẹ súnmọ́ bí ẹ jẹ́ ká jọ pín.
Ẹ bá wa dá sí.
Yorùbá TV 247. Ẹ bá wa pín.